In today's video, I want to talk about becoming friends with your bad feelings or even your intolerable feelings, and I want to provide a personal example from my own life. If you enjoy this video, please hit the like button and please subscribe if you want access to more content. So a very simple concept to me is that we can become friends with all of our feelings. And that includes the so-called bad feelings or even intolerable feelings. But that's not to say that it's easy to do. For example, it's a simple concept to say, oh, if I want to be healthy, I should eat well, eat good foods, and I should exercise. And most people know what that means, to eat well and to exercise. And yet, for some people, it's actually very challenging or even impossible to do. So similarly, becoming friends with your bad feelings, I'm not suggesting that it's easy to do, but it is a very simple concept. So the concept is that all of your feelings are just things going on inside you. They're not inherently dangerous to you. So what might cause you to feel a certain way might be dangerous to you. So if something causes you to be fearful, it's not your fear that's dangerous to you, it's this outside thing that's causing that fear. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in depth from my own life. When I was a child, my father, who was a very big man, about 350 pounds and a lot of muscle, he would sometimes go into tirades and go into rages and fits. And sometimes in these fits and rages, he would beat me, and fairly severely. And I'm not talking about discipline. So I'm not talking about, hey Sam, if you do this, I'm gonna spank you. Which he did do sometimes, but that was discipline, and that's a very different thing. No, these were things when something was wrong with him and he was lashing out and beating me without cause or reason. And when he went into these rages, I would feel a certain way. Just quickly walk you through the feeling. Maybe terrified is somewhat accurate, but what was going on inside is if he started hitting me, I would immediately go numb. So I didn't really feel it, and I would be expansive. I would just feel expansive is the best word for it. So like I was a very large human, and I would feel weightless, like I was falling backwards out of my body into the infinite universe. And those were the feelings that I associated with being beat and attacked when my dad was in a rage. And those feelings, because they were connected to that trauma, that terror, I thought those feelings were intolerable. So as an adult, if someone were angry with me, I felt those feelings, and they were so difficult for me to experience that I would immediately try to shut them down. And the strategies for shutting them down were similar to how I would shut them down as a child. I would try to manage the other person's feelings. So when I was a child, I'd try to calm my dad down. Or as an adult, I would try to calm the person down or explain why they didn't need to be angry with me. And that worked just fine. There was nothing wrong with that. Another strategy I might do is to make myself small. So when my dad was in a rage, I would just be very quiet and hope that he'd calm down on his own before beating me. Or if he was beating me, I would just be quiet and endure it, and it would stop and go away. And so just being small, and sometimes even trying to get away. So if he started in a rage, I would just be in a different room pretty quickly. And these coping mechanisms were very appropriate for a child, and certainly appropriate for some situations as an adult. However, what was missing is now that I became an adult, there's another coping strategy or another response mechanism, which is to, one, allow myself to feel those feelings, because the feelings aren't bad. I mean, some people take drugs in order to feel weightless, like they're falling out of their body, and numb. So some people want that feeling. And I started realizing as an adult, oh, these feelings, there's nothing wrong with them. They were so connected to that trauma that I had a tough time differentiating the two, the trauma from the feelings. So as an adult, an appropriate response in some situations is to just allow yourself to feel and to be okay with it. And step number 2 is to be okay with someone being angry with me. So that was something I couldn't do until I became aware of all of this stuff happening inside me. So now I feel like I'm friends with that feeling, first of all. So if I feel that feeling, sure, if I was out and it looked like someone was going to beat me up in the street, that childish response of trying to manage that person's emotions or running away would still be responsive or still be appropriate. But if I'm in a normal situation with normal adults who aren't harming me, then another response is certainly more fitting, and that is to allow them to be angry. What's wrong with someone being angry with you? There's nothing wrong with someone being angry with you. And to allow myself to feel those feelings. There's nothing wrong with those feelings. But the journey wasn't easy. Like I said, it's a pretty simple concept to become friends with all of your feelings, especially your bad feelings and your perhaps intolerable feelings. But to get to the point where I could actually experience these feelings, it was like a 3-month journey. So first I had to identify it. If you had asked me 15 years ago, hey Sam, are there feelings that you can't tolerate? I would have said no. I wasn't even aware of how intolerant I was of these specific feelings. Once I identified it, and once someone floated the concept to me that, hey, you can become friends with all your feelings, then it was like a 3-month journey to actually become friends with this feeling. What I did is I kept imagining the trauma, because my father had passed on, so I couldn't have conversations with him, but I would imagine the traumatic incidents, and then that would trigger the feelings inside me, and those feelings were so intense. And I would just try to be with those feelings, and it wasn't easy. Initially, it was so hard for me. But after months of this, I finally started to make progress. And the final piece of the puzzle for me, I think if I had done this on day 1, it wouldn't have been effective, but by day 90 or day 60 or however long it took, by the kind of near the end of this process, the strategy that ultimately worked for me was to imagine myself as an adult going back into those childhood experiences. And so I imagined myself going into a room right after my dad had beat me, walking into the room and saying, hey Mom, I don't need you to say anything, but I'd like you to be witness. And hey Dad, I don't know what's going on with you, but there's something so gnarly in your experience that you're losing control of yourself. You're actually violently taking it out on me, and this is causing deep harm for me. And whatever's going on with you, when you're in that experience, it's okay to be in your experience and to not interact with me. So in those moments, try not to interact with me and try to work through whatever's going on with you. And it was so interesting when I did that. For me, it was the final piece of the puzzle, because I realized, when my dad is raging, he's not a strong adult. He's actually going through his own trauma. Something gnarly is happening with him. And so now I no longer see someone who's angry with me as this powerful human. Now when someone gets angry with me, I see them as possibly a wounded child. Not always, but of course that's a possibility, right? And certainly I see my dad in retrospect, in this new perspective, through this new lens, where I recognize, wow, when he was going through that, yeah, I was on the wrong end of a beating, and that was no good, but he was also going through something that was very powerful for him. So after this 3-month journey, now I no longer can trigger myself by remembering these traumatic experiences. It actually, I keep coming back to, my dad was going through something hard, and I have this empathy for him, and I no longer fear those moments. And certainly now when I feel numb and weightless, like I'm falling out of my body, now that feeling is a very good friend. If someone's angry with me and they're willing to tell me what they're angry about, that's often an opportunity to connect more deeply with them. Other feelings that I've met where people say they can't tolerate them or they're bad feelings, some people can't tolerate loneliness. I, for one, love loneliness. That's a feeling I've always connected with in a positive way. Usually if I'm lonely for a couple of days, I end up randomly meeting new friends, and I think that's my subconscious pushing me when I feel lonely, because feeling lonely is uncomfortable. It's totally uncomfortable. And so it pushes me to do something in my life where I end up with more friends. And so I connect feelings of loneliness with hey, I'm about to extend my friend network or my social network. But I know some people cannot tolerate loneliness. I couldn't tolerate feelings of jealousy in my early 20s, and that has flipped completely. So in my mid-20s, before I knew about any of this stuff, I actually started to like those feelings that were associated with jealousy. And I know feelings associated with jealousy are very intolerable for a lot of people. Sadness is really intolerable for some people. Shame. And this video I did as a response to Susan L. Thank you, Susan, for commenting on some previous videos. And I believe you had said shame is a feeling you just never want to have. And so to me, shame is a great friend, because shame is you telling yourself that you want to be doing things differently. So shame is something you only feel if you really agree that you should be doing something differently, or else you wouldn't feel it. So to me, shame is always self-imposed. Sure, someone might say something to you that makes you feel shame, but ultimately it's you yourself, you must agree with them, or you probably wouldn't feel shame. Or perhaps you feel shame in different cases than I do, but I certainly see shame as a very close friend, very uncomfortable feeling, at the same time a very helpful friend and a helpful guide to help me understand, oh wow, I'm feeling this way because I want to be behaving differently than I am, and someone called me out on it. And so I often like when humans are giving me feedback that causes me to feel these so-called bad feelings, because if I do feel these bad feelings, I must agree at some core level with what the feedback people are giving me that's kind of harsh to hear. Thanks for watching this video. Again, please hit the like button if you got anything out of it, and subscribe if you want more content.